where we're going to be exploring genomics and genomic medicine, the implications, opportunities and challenges for New Zealand. Genomic medicine is fundamentally changing the way scientists, clinicians, patients understand diseases and their treatments. Using genomic information for disease research isn't new, but advances in technology like how we sample and the way we analyse the data accelerates new insights into personal health and precision medicine. So the plan tonight is to explore what genomic information is and hear from our amazing panel about the exciting projects they're working on and the opportunities for Aotearoa, as well as the questions it raises for patients, health workers and the services they provide. We'll find out what's happening with genomics in New Zealand and hear how we're doing compared to Australia and beyond. We'll then look at future scenarios. How can we realise the full potential of genomics to personalise healthcare? Who's going to lead that? Is that person in this room? Big question. What happens if we do nothing and we miss the genomic bus? What are the implications of that? And at the end, there'll be time for your questions, and I know there'll be lots of questions because it's a fascinating topic, and we're going to have to move at a bit of pace here. So the last session is we'll open up and we'll hand the microphones out. But I'd like to introduce the panel for this evening's discussion, and first up, kia ora, Huti Watson. Huti is the former chair and deputy chair of Ngāti Porou Hauora Charitable Trust Board. As a senior fellow of the Atlantic Fellowship for Social Equity, she's working on the iwi's genome project, The Genetics of Gout in Tairāwhiti, co-led with Otago University. She has a strong focus on the protection of Māori rights and the integration of Mātauranga Māori in biomedical sciences in Aotearoa. Professor Cris Print, hi Cris. Cris is from the University of Auckland's Department of Molecular Medicine and Pathology and a previous founder of a biotech pharmaceutical company. Cris's work focuses on the use of genomics and bioinformatics to understand cancer. His team apply cutting-edge techniques at the Maurice Wilkins Centre's Immuno-Oncology flagship program. He chairs Te Ira Kawai and is acting chair of the New Zealand Institute of Environmental Sciences and Research, ESR. David, g'day David. David Bunker led the Queensland Government's $25 million Genomics Accelerator program designed to speed up the adoption of genomics into everyday care. David's the independent chair of the National Industry Genomics Alliance of Australia, InGEna, great website, worth a look, and he has produced and co-authored Australia's blueprint for a national approach to the management of genomic information. And finally, Richard. G'day, Richard. Richard Vines is Deputy Chair of the Australian Genomic Cancer Medicine Centre and also the founder and CEO of Rare Cancers Australia. It's a patient advocacy group that he set up 10 years ago, and its mission is to improve the lives and outcomes of rare cancer patients. Well, let's start off, Huti, by really finding out your experience and finding out how you got involved in the world of genomics.
Kia ora, thank you, Simon. Tuatahi e mihi kia koe e te matua nāu I whakatau mai kia mātou I tēnei pō. O ti rā ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe, me te pare mate e tū mai nei, tēnā kōrua ngā minita, I wainganui a mātou. O ti rā ki ngā rauranga tirama e whakarau ika mai I tēnei pō tēnā tātou katoa. I just had to give a quick mihi there. Look, thank you, Simon. My foray into genomic research started with the investigation in our family of a rare cancer gene that finds itself in the lining of the stomach, and the only way that we can actually find out who's got it is to test. You have genetic testing, and from there, if you found you to have the gene, then your stomach is removed. And there's a number of my family who have passed away because by the time it's in the lining of the stomach, by the time it's found, it's too late. It's terminal. So a number of family members passed away, and a number of them still walking around today because of genetic testing. So that really generated my interest and passion in this particular kaupapa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Huti. Cris Print, how did you get involved? You've had a fairly illustrious career.
Oh, kia ora. I don't know about illustrious, but I've got three personal reasons for being passionate about genomics in healthcare. The first is as a university professor, I can see the power of genomics for patients, but also the power to address inequity. The second, as a former biotech entrepreneur, I can see the value of genomics industry. I think the current global size of the genomics industry is around 35 billion and predicted to top 100 billion in 5 years' time. But the most powerful for me is a personal experience. Several of my family have passed away from blood clots. I never really thought about that for me until I had my genome sequenced and found that I have an error in one of the genes that controls blood clotting. So now I wear those silly white stockings when I fly on planes and eat aspirin tablets every morning, and it's probably saved my life. Kia ora.
David.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak tonight. We're very, very honoured. So I guess I spent about 20 years in management and technology consulting roles before I came to health, and like many people who work in the health system, it was a calling. And so for me, that was a very personal experience. One of my children, my daughter Dale, is 23 now, lives with severe and multiple physical and intellectual disabilities. She requires 24/7 care, one-on-one care, and very high needs. And the condition at the bottom of Dale's cerebral palsy and terrible seizure disorder is in fact a genetic condition. Now, 20 odd years ago, we went through that experience that many people have of the diagnostic odyssey that took a number of years. Today, that could be tested with a simple blood test. Now, having spent the last 15 years in senior leadership roles in the health system and health and medical research, I also understand the significant cost that that odyssey had on our health system and to my family and to my daughter. And so for me, that personal connection drove a strong desire to work in the healthcare system, and really where I see the foundation of the future, which is a learning health system and one that is driven around personalised medicine and precision healthcare. And the things that underpin that is digital health, so better connected health, genomics and precision medicine and the right drugs and the right treatment, and things like consumer and community involvement and actually having genuine patient-centric care. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land here. Huti spent some time trying to get me to be able to pronounce it, but I'm not that brave. I'd just like to acknowledge them, elders past, present and future. For me, there are, I guess, two messages to open with. One is we're going to talk a lot tonight about patients, and we tend to just mentally put them in a different category, like they're not here. And they are all here, they're you. Whether you were a patient, whether you are a patient, or whether you're going to be a patient, this is very personal. This conversation about how we build health systems with genomic science is all about each and every one of us, and I wouldn't like us to sanitize it by considering it as a separate group of people. From my personal point of view, I run Rare Cancers Australia because my wife is a 30-year survivor of something called medullary thyroid carcinoma. We would have lost her a couple of years ago, but for genomic testing and a clinical trial, which she was able to enroll on as a consequence of that. And to that end, she is happily sitting at home, spending money renovating our house. So, good outcome, I think. The other reason I'm here is because I'm the Deputy Chair of the Australian Genomic Cancer Medicine Centre, which is also called OMICO. And we put a proposal to government in the last year of the Conservative government in Australia, which demonstrated the value of embracing genomic science. And to give you just a quick indication, and we'll come back to it, I'm sure, if you take the top 50 companies in the world by research and development spend, the top 50, then 15 of them are pharmaceutical companies. And if you look at the way we can develop research to attract funding into Australasia generally, then there is not just a health opportunity there, there's an economic opportunity. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's have a quick look at greatest hits. What's happening on the ground here in Aotearoa today with genomics? Cris and Huti, I guess I'll get you to navigate our way through a few projects.
Okay. Kia ora, thank you. I just start with our little story. So I'm not a scientist, and I can't, my background's public health, and I can't really speak for anyone else except Ngāti Porou. So Ngāti Porou is my tribe, Hikurangi Te Maunga Waiapu Te Awa. Ngāti Porou Hauora some 16 years ago began their interest in engaging in genomic research with Dr. Paratene Ngata in the genetics of gout, which really laid the platform for the future research that we've been engaging in. One of the things was that on the Ngāti Porou Hauora board, we just didn't want to be left behind. You know, we felt that there were already enough inequities. Arguably, our population carry the heaviest burden of health in the country, and so we wanted to be proactive, and for this to be genomic medicine to be one of the tools that we bring to reduce those inequities in our area. So we've been engaged in a couple of projects, well, a few actually. There's one Aotearoa Very Own project, which is really about creating a reference base for Māori, a bit of a catalogue, if you like. And the other one is the Rākei Order, which is developing an exemplar as to how we're actually going to bring those research findings to translate into healthcare. And I think one of the challenges that we're now thinking is that, you know, it's too slow. It's just been too slow. And so we want to be able to look at ways that we can accelerate that. And so meeting these wonderful gentlemen and talking about the kinds of work that they've been involved in makes me really hopeful that we can do this. But the other option, of course, is to go further afield, go overseas, to look up for other partners who can help us to do that. Kia ora.
Great.
Kia ora. I guess I can talk from a slightly different angle. I think in New Zealand we do a lot of genomic medicine research that is done overseas, but it tends to be small scale, short 3-year cycles, relatively unsustainable. But it is being done. I guess the way I visualise it is like when you see a flock of birds that are starting to fly, they're just getting into formation and just getting organised, and I think that's about where we are in New Zealand with genomic medicine. But without leadership and investment, that's where we're going to stay. And if we stay like that, I think we're going to fall increasingly behind our overseas cousins. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we move forward tonight.
So there's this idea that there's sort of a self-organising element going on at the moment. There's informal relationships and people are sort of working cross-platform, cross-organisation, cross-culture, but it's happening sort of behind closed doors almost.
Kia ora. Yes, that's right. Maybe not behind closed doors, but isolated projects. The Rākei Order project that Huti just spoke of, I'm also involved in. It's a magnificent project, but it has a limited short-term funding to generate a genomic medicine in New Zealand. There's projects doing DNA sequencing on blood of patients to identify mutations, to identify when cancers are coming back or change therapies. There's the amazing work that ESR did, which is a type of public health genomic medicine, doing the sequencing in wastewater of the COVID-19 genomes, and more recently doing sequencing of patients in hospitals to identify the particular variants they have. There's the work that's regularly done by many people in the audience who are in oncology and pathology, stratifying or choosing the right medicine for the right patient at the right time. But unfortunately, we have a lot of inequities in this. We have very little funded what we call companion diagnostic tests that can identify expensive therapies. We have very little funding for immunotherapies, although this is increasing, that boost the immune system. Genomics is used to identify the patients that are most likely to benefit from those therapies. So it is certainly all happening. We've recently very lucky to have the Aotearoa Genomic Healthcare Alliance formed, which is a collaboration between industry and scientists and clinicians and patients to really speak with a single voice to try and advocate for leadership and to try and provide true information about a knowledge-based implementation of genomics in New Zealand.
David and Richard, you've been here for a couple of days now and you've been gazing. I know we've had a few chats, we met for breakfast and we've had a few discussions. What are you where are we at in terms of our evolution and our embracing of genomics?
Oh, I think you're in the same zone. It's too early for me to really say. I would just make one point though when we're talking, because sometimes this argument devolves back to cost and money. But what Cris is saying is absolutely right. But if you can what you can also do with genomic testing is exclude treatments from patients and not waste their time and not waste government money by treating them with things that clearly won't work. And I think that's important. From our point of view, from my point of view, I think it's now happening. It's now a race. People are adapting, and the minister spoke at length, and as you would expect, about equity. And I think we have to get on the boat, and we have to pedal like hell, because genomic science and genomic medicine is coming, and it will come as either something that is for everyone or something that is for the wealthy, but it's coming.
Thank you. David, what's your take?
Yeah, look, a bit like Richard, I'm not deeply involved here, but I've been lucky to have some conversations with the fledgling industry genomics group that's forming here, and that's been terrific. Look, I think there's a lot going on, and I agree. We saw that in Australia as well. There was a lot going on, but we lacked a kind of a coordinating force until we had a strategy and policy position. And what that meant was the government had a chance to talk about what the policy should be and an implementation framework that allowed us to have conversations around the key issues of the day. And so we did look at things like resourcing and servicing. We wanted to understand the data. We wanted to understand things like equity. And that framework, I think, really created, I'll say, a level playing field, and that everyone was able to start working together in a more collaborative fashion. Oh, you do that and we do this, let's work together. And a reduction in duplication of effort. So I think that's the present opportunity for you.
So you're suggesting that we need some sort of leadership here. We need someone to grab this opportunity and drive it, and we need some sort of strategy, and we need some sort of implementation strategy.
I think, well, my experience was delivering or designing and delivering, because I'm a strategy and delivery guy. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a clinician, not a hospital administrator, health bureaucrat, etc. So I don't have a horse in the race, if that makes sense, but I'm very interested how we all come up to the start line together and run. And for us, it was about understanding how we were going to invest Queensland Government's $25 million over 5 years to accelerate the adoption into everyday care. And for me, everyday care was about how our health system worked in reality. It was important that we connected the department, the hospitals and the universities together. It would have been great to have industry involved, but we were not quite at that level at that stage. But absolutely, that framework made our decision-making about funding investment to inform the current and future choices for genomics medicine much more practical.
Is genomics something you just bolt onto an existing system, or do you have to sort of throw all the toys out the cot and then rebuild?
Okay, so in our program, the business case was very clear that we needed to do clinical demonstrations to show the value, and we did a lot of work that showed, in fact, where treatment wasn't useful. We did a lot of work in infectious disease control around hospital-acquired infection, so I really sort of extended the idea of genomics to not just being about humans, but to be about, dealing with antimicrobial resistance and those sorts of things, which cost the health system a huge amount of money if you have to shut a hospital ward down, for example. But we also looked at the capability in the system, and that was the key. So we wanted to understand the health economics. We wanted to understand the workforce. We wanted to understand this idea of innovation and where that technology was coming from and what we would do with the data and the management. And that gave us a layered approach to then line up all the actors in the system with their respective roles and responsibilities, and then take to them a larger case that says, well, we'll invest here to lift the genetic capability and understand it, here around diagnostics, here around data and technology. That strategy and framework made it a lot easier to make decisions and make sure that they worked.
Yeah, look, I think firstly, I should say that the reason that we set up Rare Cancers, one of the reasons is, as I said, my wife has a long time cancer, and when we set it up in 2012, there were no drugs listed on the Australian PBS, the equivalent of Pharmac, for her particular type of cancer. And as I sit here today, that situation remains exactly as is. So I'm certainly not, I wouldn't want any of you to think that this is a loud-mouthed Australian turning up to tell you how bloody brilliant we are, because we've got exactly the same issues. But rare cancers create an interesting parallel, an interesting problem to precision medicine or genomic science, in that you end up with very small patient populations that are not necessarily commercially attractive to large multinationals to provide large-scale clinical trials to build a body of evidence that you could take to either our PBAC or your Pharmac. And the reason that that becomes terribly important as genomic science evolves and becomes mainstream is that they're going to get cancer effectively, and I suspect every other disease is going to get rarer and rarer. And I remember having a conversation with a very esteemed oncologist very early in my career, and he said, "What do you want? World domination, because ultimately every cancer is rare." But we didn't build our systems based on small patient populations. We built our systems based on the availability of antibiotics, of blood pressure tablets, all of these kind of things. And it's not saying that they're wrong, it's just saying this is coming and maybe we need to have a rethink about how we're going to manage that. And a lot of that's going to come down to things like real world evidence, because we're never going to get the trial data.
Great, thank you. Hey, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to look at some scenarios for New Zealand and basically give the panel magic wands in terms of some of the fixes, some of the ideas of what we can actually do. So, bon appetit. See you in a moment.